Hi and welcome to Rainey Dewey's Art Spot. My name is Lorraine, my nickname is Rainey, and you can call me Rainey. Today's video I'm focusing on, well, I really just wanted to talk about this love-hate relationship that I have with watercolor. I enjoy watercolor, I've been using it for many years, but there are certain properties to watercolor that make it a little bit frustrating at times. And so I'm beginning to work on oil painting, which I'll share here in the future on my YouTube channel. But for now, I wanted to talk about things that I love about watercolor and the things that I find frustrating. So here I have a piece of 140-pound Arches cold press. I use that paper most often, but I recently tried a Strathmore 140-pound hot press, and I really like that paper too, so I'll share that later. But what I did here is I don't have the paper tape. This is just for demonstration purposes. So I wet the whole surface, and I'm just laying in some cobalt, and I believe I mixed a little bit of Winsor green shade into it. And so when I put the paint on the surface of the paper, you can see, because the paper is so very wet, the paint just explodes. And so the control I do have is that I can lift the paper, I can tilt the paper, and then as I'm doing here, I can add more pigment. Now I'm doing all this while it's very wet. And then I'll tilt it. You can add water if you want it lighter. So I'm trying to control where it goes. I'm trying to create, one of those really nice washes that you can perhaps use as a sky in a landscape painting. If you change the format to a vertical format instead of horizontal and use a few other colors, you can use that as a background for some floral. So you can see I'm adding paint, I'm adding water, and I'm lifting and tilting. You'll also notice that I'm trying to move the paint with a brush that is saturated with water. I'm also trying to lift off a little bit of the blue by using plain water. So you can move the paint with water and with your brush. Here I'm blotting with a paper towel, trying to retain a little bit of the light for clouds. The nice thing about doing these kinds of washes is they're quick and they are each unique. So those essentially are the things that I love about watercolor washes. And so the things that I find frustrating about them are the saving the whites in a particular way without using masking fluid can be difficult, and masking fluid to mask out the whites to me is very frustrating, and I don't enjoy that process. Here I'm beginning another short demonstration using that watercolor wash technique for the sky, and then we're going to be fooling around with some other techniques to illustrate what watercolor can do and why it's exciting. The one thing that I find frustrating about watercolor is you have to be patient at times. As the paper dries, you get different effects. So what I've done here is I wet just the top. You can see the really strong demarcated line there that that's where the water stops and the paper on the bottom is dry. So you have control over where your paint goes by specifically wetting certain parts of your paper. Now the top part is very wet, and so I'm mixing a color combination that I really enjoy using. It is ultramarine mixed with burnt sienna mixed with alizarin crimson. And so those colors, depending on how much you use of each, you can get a different tone. You can move it toward the brown, to the orange, the purple, really versatile. And you can see the paper is very wet, so everything is really spreading. This is where my patience in the process becomes a problem for me. I probably just need to sit and wait for it to dry, but instead most of the time I push forward too quickly, and then everything's very diffused. And so that's one of the things that that's not on watercolor, that's on me for not being patient enough to wait. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding, while the top of the paper is wet, and I'm adding all of these different colors, trying to give, you can use these effects to make a little hedgerow of trees, which is what I'm doing here. And as it's drying, just as I did in the little previous demo of the sky, I'm just continuing to layer. I'm adding, you can see different colors. I think that was vermilion. That was that orange. And then I'm just intensifying everything along the bottom of the hedgerow. And this is what's exciting about watercolor. You can paint a little distant hedgerow of trees without having to do all the details. You can just let the water and the paint dance on the paper and do the work for you. You do have some control in that you can push the paint around on the paper, and then you can patiently wait, which I have a hard time doing, and add details as the paper gets more dry. And then the other thing that you can do is you can use a more intense or thick pigment, and that will prevent the paint from really popping or bursting on the paper. So those are the ways you can control it. But then the beautiful thing about it that makes it exciting is each time you do it, it's going to be a little bit different because of the way the water and the paint interact on the paper. So that's what makes it exciting. I think that's what makes it difficult to abandon watercolor altogether, because as I'm beginning to explore oil painting, you definitely have more control, but you have to make a brush stroke for every single thing, where with watercolor you can use the paint and the water and the paper to do some of the work for you. So the one thing I would like to emphasize is that if you just practice these techniques, get a little scrap, like this is a little scrap of paper, you don't have a lot invested except just a little of your time to practice. And so wet your paper as I've done, and then work it as the paper begins to dry. Here I'm going to also, this is another great thing about watercolor, you can use the texture of the paper and the side of your brush to accomplish some of these effects, like the little sparkling of the snow. I don't have to paint each sparkle. I've taken the brush that's loaded with a fairly diluted concentration of the same colors in the sky, and I laid my brush and I dragged it gently along the surface of paper, and so the paper ended up doing, the paper, the brush, and the paint did the work, which was, I find it all very exciting, to be perfectly honest. So anyway, I'm going to go paint the other side and try to bring it all together. Same thing, same techniques, wet paper, tilting. Don't be attached to a particular design because watercolor doesn't allow that. And I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful wash. So you have to be satisfied with that. You can't say, oh, I wanted a cloud there, but I'm not going to be able to accomplish that because the watercolor went there. You have to say, oh, that's a beautiful wash. And that has to be enough. So here's, I'm creating some illusions of trees, and I'm not painting every tree, but I'm letting the watercolor paint, water, and paper do the work for me. So the things that are really exciting about watercolor honestly far outweigh the frustrations, but I still think it's a good idea to have another medium so you can take a break from one medium and go explore another, and then you come back with a fresh mind and fresh heart for it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on loving and hating watercolor. If you have any thoughts, I would really love to hear them, and I really appreciate your watching. Thanks for stopping by. Happy painting. If you liked this video, please don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when new videos are posted, and if you could give a thumbs up, that would really help me out. I really do appreciate it. Again, thanks for watching. Happy painting.